Hey everybody, thanks for checking out this video. This is part 2 of an underrated deck lists video that I have partnered with the Nexus podcast with to get these out to you. Make sure you check out their channel, of course, and see part 1. In this one, we might have 4 lists for you if I can go fast enough. But if not, we've got 3 awesome underrated lists. Of course, just quick disclaimer, make sure the best thing you can do is know the meta around you and also be comfortable. If you don't have time to test these deck lists for your PQ, that's okay. I'd recommend playing what's comfortable for you, but maybe you've got a couple PQs and so you have time to test some of these for another one or even just a showdown. These are some awesome, really fun, underrated lists, and we're excited to share them with you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on your channel. It's nice in here. Love the vids. Yeah, no, thanks everyone for checking out the second part or first part if you're watching this first. The other one is at the Nexus TCG. And as Travis said, we have some really nice lists for you that you can consider to play at the PQ if you're still undecided and you're pretty flexible on your choice and you want something that it's maybe going a bit under the radar, have a bit of a a surprise element. We talk about it in the other video. Then definitely check them out. But I think we should dive into them.
Let's do it. All right. Ooh, oh, did you want to fix your camera first, or?
Yeah.
No worries.
There I am.
Easy peasy. All right, so this I found this list just from going through the Star Wars Unlimited Discord, but I actually basically have experience playing against this list last weekend because there was someone locally who beat me in the finals of a 1K essentially with a list that was very, very close to this. I don't think it was this exact list, but it was very, very close. And I just had to dig in and try to find where the inspiration from this list came from. And some things that I can already tell you about is this list is way faster than you think. You might look at this and be like, yeah, sure, it's got some aggro stuff in here. But I was playing Sabine Green, and unfortunately in the finals, and I can't help but mention this, but in the finals, I was able to beat them in Swiss, but in the finals in game 1, somehow with 14 2-drops in my deck, there were none in either of my hands from the mulligan. And that happening to you against a list like this, you're gonna die. And this deck, it performed really well. The link to this list is awesome. This gamer has left a nice detailed description to help you understand some combos with this list and some reasons specifically for ISB agent combos with Tarkin Town. But there's some crazy stuff that you can do that can allow you to have so much damage on for you to attack your opponent's base with on turn 2. It's crazy. You also have Ruthless Raider and Fett's Fire Spray to hit off of the triple Dark Raid just as early as turn 3. And with how many spaceships are in here and the reach of Surprise Strike and the Ruthless Raider damage, it's pretty crazy. The list that I played against, I believe they did have some number of surprise attack or sneak attack. It's sneak attack is what it is. Yeah, sneak attack. I always combine surprise strike and sneak attack together sometimes. But yeah, sneak attack that you, after you triple dark raid a Ruthless Raider out, and then it comes back to your hand, and then the next turn you get to sneak attack it, do it again, and then it dies, and then does even more damage. It's really crazy. Emmy, let me know your first impressions of this. What do you think?
It's scary. First impression is two things. It's scary because space is definitely the lesser utilized arena. I think, the game design at this moment favors ground in many shapes and forms. The leaders don't deploy into space as a first thing, but also in terms of numbers of units. So more usually like heavy in on the ground arena. So just going into space, we've seen with other decks, it can really steal games. The other thing I really like is Well, first of all, the consistency. If you want a consistent deck, if you look at this, is 3 copies of every card part of for the Cartus. What is it called?
Yeah, Cartel Spacer.
Cartus Spacer. There's 2 copies to make sure that we get to 50 and not 51 and upset people. But very, 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 very consistent. So to me, like, it's just very scary. Would you describe this as an aggro list, perhaps?
Absolutely, yeah. And I would honestly consider this probably one of the most aggro lists. This is probably more aggro than Sabine and yellow Boba for sure. It is crazy. I know everybody knows how scary it is when a Fett's fire spray comes down. It doesn't matter what your life total is. When a fire spray comes down, it's pretty scary. But usually, when a fire spray comes down in this deck, it is killing you like that turn. Like you're actually just dying. And so you don't get a second action. Like you have one action to stop it, and otherwise you're dead. Usually in this list, it is surprisingly fast.
Yeah, the other 6 cost space unit that really scares me here is that Rootless Raider. And I think it's, in the context of underrated deck lists, this is an underrated card for me. Is good stats in space that has an immediate value with damage when deployed and when played and when defeated. 2 damage to a unit, 2 damage to base. In this list, even worse because we have Tarkin Town. So, if we get to the 6 resource turn where we haven't used Tarkin Town, we have so much flexibility. But even without that, it's just like 4 damage to base and 4 damage to unit split 2 and 2 at any point, and it's just a really huge body on space that can just close the game, similarly to Fett's Fire Spray. The other card that is really scary, obviously, is the Lurk TIE Phantom. Good friend of mine, Frankie, shout out Frankie. Um, we're building decks, we're preparing for PQ together. And whenever currently going through 2, 3 lists, his reaction to the list is immediately is just like, how do you deal with a Lurking TIE Phantom? Like his approach right now is like he's so scarred by Lurking TIE Phantom. It's like you gotta play a deck that is able to deal with Lurking TIE Phantom. Because if you can't, you just lose the game. You just lose the game.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, probably. And the last couple things I'll say on this before I move to the next list is yes, like you said, Ruthless Raider. The thing that's really scary about Ruthless Raider, and in my opinion, especially in this deck, scarier than Fett's Fire Spray, is that it doesn't have 5 power. Because a lot of the decks that play blue cards, they play Fell the Dragon, and Fell the Dragon and Takedown, Ruthless Raider ignores those cards entirely because of the 4 power. And it also just sucks too because it's a card you don't want to kill it either, because then it's still gonna get you. It's so rough. The other thing that I'll say is the list that I did play against, and it could be a consideration if you're wanting to look into this, is I don't think they had the Kylo's TIE silencers, probably for a budget reason, but I would still recommend them. But they did have some number of snapshot reflexes in here. And that is another thing that if blue decks are relying on make an opening to get rid of your lurking TIE Phantoms, you can just snapshot reflex onto a lurking TIE Phantom, and then it's not dying to make an opening anymore. And it's kind of like the final straw, right? It's like the last thing that's like, if they were relying on that, you can literally solo like any matchup with a snapshot reflex on the lurking TIE Phantom if that's your objective.
I think that was very convincing. We built a really good case for folks to pick this up for PQ. Let's move to the next one then, which I was very surprised when you sent me this list actually, because I mean, Moff Gideon hasn't been in any tier list or top or even in any tournament that I've seen recently. So I'm curious to just ask you, like, why?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm excited to talk about it. So, basically, this list, this is my version of it currently. And one thing that I am gonna say is like, oh, how do I want to start this? Okay, the first thing I'll say is I drew inspiration from this from a local gamer, Jamar. He, the last weekend there was multiple like high end tournaments that we were playing locally. I wasn't able to go to the Saturday one. He went to the Saturday one. And not only did he get into the top 4 with this, but he was a finalist. He did end up losing to Green Cad Bane in the finals. But what's crazy is in game 1 of the finals, he still took it against the Green Cad Bane and was in the finals with not this deck list. His was a bigger, what I would consider an even more greedier version. He had the like big Blizzard ATs or whatever, the 8 costs in there as well. And but basically my version of it, what I did is I took mine to lean a little bit more into the Lurking TIE Phantom by putting the TIE Advances in here, because one of my favorite things with Triple Dark Raid is you play a Lurking TIE on the 3 resource, and then on the 4 resource, if you have some 6 cost vehicles in your deck, you can play the Triple Dark Raid to try to get out an ATST or the Pirate Battle Tank. And alternatively, if you end up landing on a TIE Advanced, then the TIE Advanced buffs up your Lurking TIE Phantom, gets to attack itself, and then the following turn, it returns to your hand, and then you can play it again, and you could just make your Lurking TIE even more insane. Or it's your flip turn with Moff Gideon, who is also an Imperial. You can deploy Gideon, and then you can use the TIE Advance on Gideon, make him bigger. But the one warning that I do want to give against this deck is, so even though this friend of mine, they were able to perform really well, it got to the finals of at least a showdown type quality of event with a deck that's even greedier than this. What I must say is the warning that I think I left in the other video was that the locals around me has been very Sabine light. So light, it's been close to 0 Sabines. And in my in playing games against like much more aggro decks, even Kylo's, this deck can struggle against those. And so that's a warning. I would say if the combos and the things that I say about this deck intrigue you, I would say the first thing you want to do is test your list of this against Sabine and see how you feel against Sabine if you do have Sabine meta.
Yeah, I mean, specifically in the context of going to a PQ, I wish we could have a gentleman's agreement of like, hey, can we just, no Sabine anymore, please? Play other aggro decks, no Sabine. But no, the list is very interesting. I think, the base of it, the fact that you're playing green villainy and gives you access to OB, Vader, Super Laser Tack, it's just so strong. One card that is in only one copy, but I really like is that Pirate Battle Tank, which it's somewhat underrated. I say it's underrated just because it's in no decks, where I feel like in some decks could fit, and perhaps this is one. But I guess my last question here is like, what is that sideboard? Is it
Yeah.
actually like there's reason to the madness, or is like pure madness?
Yeah, so some of the rest of these following this list and the next list that follow it, whatever you see in the sideboard is not necessarily a sideboard, but more so other cards that during the deck building process of this, these were some other cards that I was thinking about or were maybe in the lists that I drew the inspiration from. And so I left them as one ofs in the sideboard to just remind me as I'm working on these lists, what about these cards? What do we think about these cards? That's really what the sideboard is about there. The other thing that I wanted to point out is, yes, the Pirate Battle Tank. I do think that if I were to continue playing this list, I would actually increase the Pirate Battle Tank up by 1, because I did feel like this list did need 4 6-drop vehicles in order to increase the consistency of using Triple Dark Raid earlier. But like the Yellow Palpatine list that we mentioned in the other video, if you haven't seen that on the Nexus channel yet, we talked about the sneak attack combo with Darth Vader and the Snowtrooper Lieutenant, which is available in this deck as well. We have Sneak Attack, we have Vader, we have the Snowtrooper Lieutenant, and a bonus combo that we have in here. And this is real. Like, I'm smiling so big right now, but like the reason why this is so exciting to me is if anybody played Green Han 1 in set 1 and tried the list that was using Sneak Attack on Home 1 to bring back a Fleet Lieutenant that allowed the Home 1 to attack immediately, this deck lets you do that with Gideon's Light Cruiser, because by having Moff Gideon as your leader, you can triple Dark Raid, bring out the Light Cruiser that's in attack position, and brings back a Snowtrooper Lieutenant, and then immediately hits the base for 9, or the ship has overwhelmed. So if you do need to hit into one of your opponent's space units, it gets to hit into the opponent's space unit immediately. It doesn't give your opponent an opportunity to react. And then the scary part is if you did that off of triple Dark Raid, then it's going back to your hand, and you could be sneak attacking it the next turn too. And then just that much damage just as a surprise to your opponent is a lot of the times just lethal. It just ends them.
That's awesome. I hope people were taking notes, because there's definitely like a few lines with that sneak attack and triple Dark Raid. I think we talked about it in the other video also about the sneak attack, Vader, Snowtrooper. But here you can go, two ways. Very, very interesting, I think. And perhaps this brings us to our third list, which is a double blue Krennic. Double blue Krennic, like Krennic, we've seen like going down in popularity since the surgeons of Kira, I would say. That's really like taking the spotlight. We are seeing double blue decks, namely double blue, not double blue, single blue full control list. I'm eating my words, apologies. Being Bosk. But we haven't seen, I guess since Idenson set 1, like a double blue, like full control list. Would you call this a full control list? Where is this coming from?
I mean, yeah, it's basically that. I mean, with the restock in there, I guess you have to tell yourself like this is trying to be the like harder control, I guess, but it's still very different from the Bosk. And we have also been seeing the double blue Ray decks, but they're the meta that they're leaning towards is different ones. I would say that the Ray. The double blue Ray is definitely leaning into like a Sabine and aggro meta to have like good matchups into that. So if you have lots of Sabines, that's probably better. Whereas the villainy side of double blue is usually much stronger against more mid-range stuff. It still has strength against the aggro as well. Of course, like Director Krennic has built-in restore on his leader side or his leader unit side, and then you also have the super strong early sentinels of Lieutenant Childs. And in this list, something that inspired me, because I'd been wanting to do some double blue things, and the double blue Rays have been inspiring to me a little bit recently too. Is, well, first of all, I am a big fan of blue villainy in general. I love blue villainy cards. And something that's really cool is if you do end up having like a pretty solid mid-range meta, including even just hard control meta, what's really cool about playing double blue, granted, we mentioned before in the last video with blue Cad Bane, you get the yellow villainy tools that allow you to sustain longer into the hard control. But what's cool about using double blue is you get to play your vigilances for 4. And so when you're playing against the hard control matchups, you can start using vigilance against them really early. And with the restock in the main deck too, you can potentially just mill the harder control sooner than they would expect and remove even some of their bigger bomb cards, such as their big ships and stuff. But what's cool about double blue villainy here with Krennic is I think people have also, just because we've gotten used to Kira and stuff too, is they've forgotten how the +1 from your damaged units with Krennic actually, like, it changes the the breaking points for some units being able to trade. And the other thing that it does too is it creates an end game state sooner with some of your units. Like for like a Child Sin takes 1 damage and now he's hitting for 7 now with Krennic. You know, if your opponent can't take it out with a single attack and then Child Sin hits your opponent in the face for 7, you know, we would see that in the green blue Krennic decks before. After a Vader would ambush and then suddenly Vader has 6 power now, that would be so much more of a pain. And so, yeah, one thing that's really cool about this deck is I've become a big fan of Dr. Pershing. And with Krennic as your leader, if Dr. Pershing pings himself, or he can ping any of your other units, they're also getting +1 power. So it's kind of a little extra cuteness that, like, when Dr. Pershing pings himself, suddenly he's a 1/4. So it's not entirely free for your opponent to attack into Dr. Pershing anymore. And yeah, it's just, you know, Vigilance, strong card. Snoke and Avenger, good cards. I really feel like Power of the Dark Side, Lieutenant Child Sin, Snoke, and Avenger. If you build any deck around those cards, I feel like it's those cards are insane. Those cards are insane.
Yeah, I agree. It's what I like about playing double blue is that you get, you know, super value from Charleston, but also obviously you have a vigilance for 4, which to me is just insane. Like that card costing 4, it just makes no sense. And you know, you talked about Dr. Pershing, which is, you know, somewhat controversial cards. I think some people love it, some people hate him. But I just wanted to highlight how set 2 is quite has been quite impactful in this like double double blue list or blue list, because we have the Pike Sentinel Pershing. What do we have? We have a Long Pike, which is getting more and more popular, obviously Snoke. And I see that First Light. That First Light is uh, a bit of a surprise there. Is there like specific reasons? Yeah, I guess the grit and the smuggle, but yeah, anything to add on the First Light?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'm excited. So the First Light is kind of my spice or whatever, my surprise card. We mentioned, I think we mentioned in the part 1 video, we talked about surprise cards or surprise, being able to play something that your opponent doesn't suspect. And in here, it's probably true that it is more optimal to not have it in the deck, probably. But for me, what's really cool with First Light is Krennic already boosts your guys by a power by being damaged. But there are a few cute things that you can do suddenly. Like if your opponent is not suspecting a First Light, especially if they are tapped to a certain number of resources. If you have the Clan Saxon Gauntlet in space, literally just the turn before, you can deploy First Light from the smuggle zone if that's what you needed to do, and do the 4 damage to the Gar Saxon or the Clan Saxon Gauntlet. And then it's damaged, so Krennic's buffing it, and it can just suddenly attack your opponent's base for 9 power. And you also have another ship out in space. And just any of these other units, there's a solid number of units that have the more than 5 or more than 4 HP to be able to eat that 4 damage and then be able to suddenly attack for so much more damage because of the First Light granting everything grit. It really is just kind of a bonus. Like if the opportunity presented itself, it's not like I'm excited to play this, but it's like in the specific scenarios where you're going back and forth, especially like against a more mid-range deck, and then you're suddenly able to be like, okay, now my guys are huge. It's actually crazy because like even just Death Trooper suddenly becomes attacks for 6 power with First Light on the board. It's
Yeah,
just
it's crazy.
crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, no, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. It was like a genuine reaction to that, because it's yeah, it hits really hard, and I like it. I like that I also picked on it without knowing that was your spice, and we got to talk about it. But nonetheless, very very interesting list. I see in the sideboard is, I guess, as you mentioned before, these are like more considerations. And then the
Yeah.
last thing I want to talk about is Second Chance, would you
Mm.
actually consider playing this card? Why is it not played at all? Um, just I think, is this an underrated card?
Yeah, the thing with me is second chance is probably a pet card. I don't think it's currently really mostly viable in almost any situation, unfortunately. There's also always the fear of waylay when you play when you play any upgrade in the game. You know, waylay is always a scary thing. Um, I think that second chance is very narrow. I think in a hard control matchup, it could be really insane because unfortunately it's double blue. It would be nice if it could have cost 3, maybe, because it's already double blue. It's really, really difficult to play. Or if it could have given any stat bonus at all, just something more. But what's really cool is, at least in the like the bigger control matchups, when you've dropped a Snoke or you've dropped an Avenger, if you're able to set up the situation where you get to play a second chance on that unit, the thing that's cool about second chance is that it grants the ability to the owner of the card, not the person who controls it. So even if your opponent did something like with a Palpatine and used change of heart and then destroyed it or something, it's still the owner gets to do the thing, not the Palpatine player does not get to do the thing. So it's actually a little bit more safer than it might seem. But what's really cool is you can set up things where in the more difficult matchups in the high end game where people are playing capital ships, if you get to play this on your Avenger and then your opponent does something crazy, you know, like flips a Palpatine and steals your Avenger, or they've got a scarier board or a Krayt Dragon or something, you can just super laser blast the board if you need to, and then you'll be able, and then
You
after
come
that you'll be
back
able
with
to get
an
you.
Avenger. Yeah, that's
It,
just crazy.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
exactly,
No,
exactly.
I'm excited to see if it will come into play at some point. I think we have time for a fourth and final underrated deck for PQ, and is Krayt Han. Maybe I, I will spend a couple of words on this, and then I want to get your insight. The one thing I want to say is, like, this is the first deck I actually built. I started playing in set 2 pretty much. And I saw Star Wars Dad, shout out to Star Wars Dad, posted a deck list, and I picked it up. I love the ramp. I love the idea of like getting into Krayt Dragon. Somewhat, I have a magnet for Krayt Dragon. I found 5 Krayt Dragons, so I was like, okay, I need to play it. It didn't work out too much for me. I think it went through a few iterations, and you know, by playing, I realized some cards weren't worth it. And namingly, initially we had Price on Your Head, which I removed because I felt like Spark of Hope was enough, especially with a Cassian and Tech.
Mm,
I love this deck, and I love that there's um, the general, what's his name? Sorry, it's a bit too
Riken.
small. Yes, he is so good. So this definitely gets my thumbs up for underrated deck for PQ.
Yeah, so I'm pretty excited to talk about this. This deck list is still in experimentation for me personally. As you can see, I don't even have a full 10 suggested sideboard cards yet. It's just 2 random cards sitting there in the sideboard, because that's how not fully tested this deck is yet. But what's really cool is, basically, I have been wanting to play Krayt Dragons in the early set 2 meta. I was playing the Krayt Dragons in the red Ray deck, and that was pretty fun. But I just wanted to be playing Krayt Dragons again. And something that's cool about playing the young Han Solo and green is that you get access to 2 kinds of ramp. Your leader has ramp of being able to just itself discount your unit by 1, but then because you're playing green, you get ramp as well. And so just the possibility of not just getting a Krayt Dragon down 1 turn earlier, but potentially 2 turns earlier is really exciting for me. And the other thing is even being able to do that with a home 1. You get a home 1 down 2 turns earlier, that is really, really insane. And like you mentioned with the General Riken, it's a really awesome card, and that's General Riken is honestly the reason why I have this list on Energy Conversion Lab, because there's many good reasons to play Energy Conversion Lab. But what's really cool is this deck list has a lot of really solid Energy Conversion Lab targets with Riken, Poe, and even potentially K2. You're able to set up a defense early enough, especially with, you'll notice that I don't really have there's 3 C3POs, 2 Gray Squadrons, and then I have the 3 R2D2s to do some like R2D2 C3PO combo. And then other than that, I have 3 drops in here that I'm just counting on discounting with the Han effect essentially as my really early plays. And then it's just ramp and then potentially dropping Riken the turn right after that and being able to Energy Conversion Lab a Riken as well. He can make himself Sentinel and then also give himself the experience because now he's Sentinel. Or you'll notice that I've got the Echo-based Defenders and I have the Bright Hopes as well. So if I was able to deploy one of those the turn before, and then I get to Energy Conversion Lab and make Riken a Sentinel, but also buff my other Sentinel that's already on the board too, it really helps you stay alive as long as you need to be able to get your Krayt Dragon out or get your home one out or even your Ewing reinforcement out as well. And what's crazy is the restore from home one and the restore or essentially restore from the reinforcement walker as well really do, I feel like, help you stay alive because of how fast you're able to ramp them out. Even if your opponent just tries to ignore you and does a bunch of damage to the base, when you get a home one out and it brings another Sentinel out with it and you have restore, things get crazy.
It's so good. One is one of my favorite cards. Really, really good deck. I think is a super solid pick. Hand 2 is probably the best leader from set 2. Maybe like some Kira enthusiast will say otherwise, or Bosk. I think set 2 has been fantastic, to be honest. But these were 4 very strong lists. I guess we'll have the links. You'll have the links in your comments.
Yeah, I'll keep them in the comments for sure. Yep. Oh, you're muted.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. And should we like wrap it up, I guess?
Yeah, absolutely. Once again, thanks to the Nexus TCG for having me over on their channel, and Emmy, he's over here representing them over here on the Travis CCG channel. Make sure you check out both videos if you have the time. And of course, like we said before, make sure you know your local meta first, and that'll better inform your decisions of how you can even just take decks like these and just be like, I want to play this, but because of these other things that are going on in my meta, maybe I tune some of these numbers a certain different way to lean more into what's happening around you. And yeah, don't forget surprise cards. Are there cards in your sideboard that could be in your main board for what's happening around you? Don't forget to think about that. And yeah, we'll see you on the Nexus TCG channel as well. And thanks for being here. Thanks for spending your time with us.
Yeah, good luck with your PQs. See you next time.
Lovely.